Hello and welcome to the Node Coach podcast. This is episode 333, 3 different kinds of ADHD. I'm welcoming back Jennifer Dall. I'm Suzanne Kohlberg. Before we dive into it, we are having some sort of technical glitch because I'm guessing I'm in the future here in Australia. Jen's all the way back in the past in America. And it reminds me of, in days of old, my kids wouldn't recognize this, but I'm sure most of my listeners would. When you called someone long distance and you spoke and then there was a delay and then they spoke. So sometimes we're inadvertently talking over each other. I don't know what this is going to be like to listen to, but I invite you to bear with us because there's so much rich information here. But if you do listen to this and you're like, what is happening? We're having a bit of future past situation happening. But on the last episode, Jen joined me. She was talking about living with ADHD, and you mentioned as an offhand comment there being 3 types. So I was like, can we have a whole episode about this? Because I didn't realize this. So Jen, take us away. What are the 3 different kinds of ADHD, please?
Okay, so briefly, and then I can go into more detail. So the first one is impulsive hyperactive. The second one is inattentive, and the third is combined. So when you think about the impulsive hyperactive, this is probably, if you don't know much about ADHD, what you think about. So people are impulsive, they're hyperactive. It would be, I'm not going to say all boys, but a lot of boys and predominantly boys, because that's the kind of behavior that you see. They're physically hyperactive. So they're bouncing around. They are impulsively saying things, doing things, making those kinds of decisions. The inattentive is presenting, meaning like when you're looking at somebody or the way you act, you look inattentive. You look like you're not paying attention. Okay. You're not physically hyperactive. You're not outwardly making impulsive decisions. And so you're presenting as inattentive, like you're just not there. You're not paying attention. And then there's combined, which is both of them together at different times. So a lot of the inattentive, it may be girls, but then there's also those boys where, and I talk about girls and boys, although I predominantly work with women, adults, because for 25 years I taught in the schools. So I'm used to boys and girls, but we're just looking now at older people. So what I was saying is the inattentive can be hidden in school or in business or in other situations where you either think they're not paying attention or you think they're not that bright or anything like that because they're not talking, right? And the combined is all together. So talking about what that looks like, let's go to the inattentive for a minute, because like I said, I keep talking about how they look like they are, but really inside in their mind, they're not. So it's all ADHD, and a lot of people, when they hear the hyperactive, they think about that impulsive hyperactive kind of person. But the people who are inattentive or combined, their hyperactivity is more in their mind. So they're thinking fast, they're thinking lots of thoughts, they're making connections that other people may not follow unless they are also maybe ADHD or know a lot of things about it. So that inattentive looks like it. So that's the good girl in school. So we were talking about this before, and you sit there and you look like you're paying attention. You look like you're right on, but you're thinking 3 steps ahead, or you're making other connections to it, or it's boring and you're thinking about something else. So your body may be very still, but your mind is not. And then the combined is, and it's probably much more common than we think, but it's that kind. But then there's also people and situations where I am hyperactive, where I am impulsive. Like on Amazon, I might be a little impulsive, and with other people who I really click with, who probably also have ADHD or have been around it enough and are open enough to it, you can act like that. Those are the 3 general classifications. And if somebody does go and get an official diagnosis, they would be given one of those. There's also all kinds of tests on the internet asking questions. that'll probably, show you which one you might be. But basically, I would look at your behaviors and how you're acting, and are you really hyperactive and moving around? Do you have to like always be standing, that kind of thing? Um, or is it kind of situational and a combination? Then that would be the combined.
I
So that is what I meant by that.
I love that description. I have a question, and you may or may not know the answer, but because I said my son has been diagnosed with autism, and autism, there is a spectrum. And because he is very social and very outgoing, a lot of people say to me, he can't be autistic because he makes eye contact. And I laugh at that because I'm like, it's a spectrum, like people who don't understand. The same with the classic ADHD. If you're not outwardly bouncing off the walls, oh, well, you're not ADHD because you're not hyperactive. My question
Yep.
is, are these things similar to autism on a spectrum? Because you spoke about impulsive. When you said Amazon, I was like, Could you be impulsive in some areas? Like I'm an impulsive spender, but when it comes to, say, planning a trip or whatever, like I want an itinerary. Like, is it that kind of thing or not so much?
Sure. Sure. And it's also, like I said, I think probably people are more combined. And when you're looking at both autism and ADHD, it's all kind of under a neurodivergent umbrella. And they're also finding that there's, if you have your Venn diagrams, you've got autism, ADHD, that center part may be getting bigger and bigger because there's so much research that wasn't done that is just now being done. If you know anything about research, they do it, and 5 years later, you hear about it. So they're just learning so much. But, very much, buying a book off Amazon is a low dollar thing that may feed into one of my hyperfixations. Planning a trip, especially a big one, and wanting it planned, that plays into a whole bunch of other things. That's money, that's time, that might be anxiety about, the trip. And so you may in different ways act like that. And in school, it may be different subjects. Maybe English is your job and you could do that. And then you get to, PE where you don't want to be doing it. And you're not like that because so much with ADHD is actually interest based. So,
Yes.
whether or not I do it has to do with my interest level of it.
I think that is such a great point that so often is missed, or like, we're talking about children with your teaching thing, and I have, young children at home, engaging their interest level, but also as an adult, like there are things that we have to do, like wash our clothes and prepare our meals, unless we are fortunate enough to have someone who does it for us or have enough income that we can pay. But like there are things that need to be done. But then I think that's where gamification and stuff comes in. Like, how can I hack the system so that I can get things done? I know we're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode, goal setting with ADHD, which will be our next episode. But for this one, I love the three different kinds that you've brought to light, and how one of them is, basically a hybrid. But this other point, and you brought it up in our last episode, and I really just want to bring it forward for people again, that there are the hyperactivity doesn't actually have to be external. It can be inside. And when we look at someone and you think that they're inattentive, and I've done this with my husband before, I've swore he isn't paying attention because he doesn't look like he is. He doesn't make eye contact. He's not nodding or whatever. And I'll be like, you're not listening to me. And then verbatim, he'll quote back exactly what I've just said, plus add on, oh, we could do this. So I think sometimes a lot of these things, the cues that we're taught from society, like someone's giving you eye contact or they're nodding or they're asking relevant questions, like we're making assumptions, and people may be wired differently, whether they're official enough to receive a diagnosis or they just do things differently than the way that we do. And us overcoming that, not assuming that everybody needs to do something the way that I do it.
Another little detail about conversations. So we could be having a conversation, and I'm polite, so I'm supposed to listen to you, but you have said something that I really want to say something about, or I really have something, and I'm sitting here and I have stopped listening to you a whole lot because if I don't want to forget that thing. So I either kind of stop listening because I'm just remember this, or I just blurt out and I interrupt you and share my story, which isn't really trying to be rude. It's just trying to bond and create this connection with you. Like, oh yeah, I also, this. And so people who don't, they may take it as being rude. And then by the other token, if you're just like, keeping it in, you're not hearing any of the rest of it.
I love how you bring attention to this, because my son does the exact thing. He will bond onto something you've said. He won't listen. Like I know this now about him, and he will actually start to move. Like, and people say, "Do you need to go to the toilet, or do you need this?" And I was like, "No, no." He's reached that point where he can't hear you anymore, and he's waiting because he's known that it's rude to suddenly interrupt and burst out. But when he feels comfortable to, like in the home, he'll do it all the time. And when people come over, my mum, she's passed now, but she never understood neurodivergency at all. And she was always saying to me, like, he doesn't listen or he's rude. And I was like, no, no, no. He's just reached the point where he's so excited. And just knowing that about him, he's just wired differently. So, but now he'll know. But sometimes literally, when you let him speak and he'll say that, he'll be like, I've forgotten. And he'll get really sad because he was really excited, but it's gone too much time and the conversation's moved and he's forgotten that. And I think when you know that about yourself, or when you know that about someone else, it just makes the whole relationship different and richer, because you're like, oh, yeah. And there are times where like in our own home or in our own space, or even times like where I'll say to him, Casimir, it's not your turn to talk, like your sister's talking or whatever, and you will see him slump. But one of the tools that I give him for that is pen and paper, so he can just make a note so he remembers, and then we can talk about it later. So I think all of this, like Jen, these things that you're bringing
I was
forward,
going to suggest that. Yeah.
different kinds, different ways that people relate and understand. And, people aren't rude or disinterested or whatever. They're just different to us. I think realizing that just brings so much more richness to our environments.
So somebody like your son or in that situation, especially with people you could have that conversation. You could even come up with a code word or a code sign. Like, I mean, I've been in conversations with adults, and because I've always been in school, I would like literally raise my hand. I have something to say, which is totally silly. Or like you said, the notebook, the idea of a parking lot or a Post-it, write it down, and then can you like forget about it for 5 minutes, and then then I want to say this. So those are both things that you could try doing.
I love that so much. So if people are listening to this, they're nodding along, they're like, oh my gosh, Jen's speaking my language. Because when you do hear someone who speaks like this and you're like, oh, I feel heard, even though we're not in the room together, where can these people find you? What can you do? What do you have to offer so they can, follow up more and, be more in your space?
Okay, so on Instagram, I'm at ADHD.holistically, and that will link you to some other things. If you go to 3stepgoal.com, so the number 3, it will link you into getting on my email list. And I have for you right now, it's a list of things of what it's okay to do and not okay to do, just reminders like it's okay to take a nap, which you may think is silly, but we need those reminders, and it's on a little info sheet, so you could even save it on your phone or print it out. And then I'm also moving away from, I have been coaching people into creating a club, basically, and where we can get all kinds of information and work together. And that's coming soon. I have ADHD, so I have lots of things on my plate. But what I'm going to be starting really soon is offering up some free, to keep it simple at this point, body double. I think we're going to talk about the next episode, some free Zoom body double sessions where we can just get together and work, and I will explain what that means next. So you get on there, you get in my mailing list as I'm getting these things going. I'm submitting a book proposal because I'm writing a book that talks about, like, if so these kinds of things like that might have happened. And then also because I do a lot with grief, looking at things people may have said to you, either for grief or ADHD, and how to work with it, decide whether or not you're going to say something to them, and then kind of working on your own goals. So like I said, ADHD, lots of things on this plate, but you could get on my mailing list and also on Instagram, and
I love that.
all of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And there's a way on there to email me. I mean, I will answer any question.
Perfect. Thank you for joining me. And yeah, I love how you gave a little teaser prequel for the next episode talking about goal setting and body doubling and all that sort of stuff. So join us for the next one. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.